You're watching Capitol Conversations with Congressman Mike McIntyre, an opportunity for the people of southeastern North Carolina to get an inside look at the issues facing the nation and the U.S. Congress. I invite you to see how your community is affected. Now, from Washington, D.C., here's Congressman Mike McIntyre.
Welcome to Capitol Conversations. I'm Mike McIntyre, your congressman from southeastern North Carolina, and this program is a part of our ongoing effort to keep you informed about our work in Washington and how it affects you. Today we have a special guest, Bill Carwile from the Federal Emergency Management Administration, or as we all know it better back home, FEMA. Bill is the Associate Administrator of Response and Recovery and was appointed to this position in May of 2009 by the President. As his title implies, he is responsible for directing FEMA's response, recovery, and logistics, and also the Office of Federal Coordinating Officer Operations. His ultimate responsibility for coordinating and synchronizing all of FEMA's headquarter operational response activities during major disasters and/or emergency activations. He's been involved in FEMA in a variety of ways, including directing FEMA's Region 9 office and as a federal coordinating officer representing the administration during major disasters, and making sure that federal resources and programs in support of our nation's governors are in place. Prior to his rejoining FEMA in 2009, he had held positions as an adjunct professor and subject matter expert for the Naval Postgraduate School, Texas A&M University, and the Homeland Security Institute. One great thing of pride for us in southeastern North Carolina is that he's a retired U.S. Army colonel. He had a distinguished 30-year career in which he served in command and operational staff positions in special forces, infantry, and headquarters organizations. And while serving our nation in the Army, he was awarded the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Bronze Star, 2 Legion of Merit Awards, and a number of other medals for his meritorious service. And as we know, being in the 82nd Airborne and Special Forces, that means he was at Fort Bragg. Mr. Carwile has a wealth of emergency management expertise and leadership experience. I'm pleased he's joined us today. We all know what this is. It's hurricane season, and we know what that means for those of us in Hurricane Alley, like southeastern North Carolina. Bill, welcome. Thank you for being with us today and during this time of the year that so many of us have lived through and seen different hurricanes strike the North Carolina coast and know the damage that can cause and what that means not only at the time of impact but in the aftermath. You've been down in Wilmington before. You've been down in the Fayetteville area when you were in the military. So you've literally been from one end of our district to the other, which is what southeastern North Carolina represents, is that whole region of North Carolina. So thank you for coming today. And I wanted to start with you just giving us a brief overview of what FEMA is and what it does. So often we don't think about FEMA until here comes a hurricane or suddenly it's the day after and people want to know, where's FEMA? Can we get help? But would you tell us what the mandate for FEMA is and how it operates?
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, Congressman McIntyre, we very much appreciate this opportunity to speak to your constituents in what we call Hurricane Alley, because y'all are hit so very frequently. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is really part of the nation's emergency management team. We happen to be the federal part of that team, representing the President, of course, in support of governors. You know, it's a big team now. It starts out with local emergency managers, tribal emergency managers, state emergency managers, but we are there to support them. We have 10 regions throughout the country. Region 4 in Atlanta supports, of course, the state of North Carolina as well as other southeastern states. We have a number of strategic communications detachments around the country to support us, as well as what we call distribution centers, or very large warehouses. We just put a new one in Atlanta to support the Southeast. It's about 3.5 football fields worth of commodities to help folks to buy some time while the private sector gets mobilized to support survivors during disasters.
Well, we know this year we had a little bit of an early surprise. Tropical Storm Beryl came through and came barreling through on the Atlantic coast and brushed North Carolina. And even though this tropical storm technically came in May, before hurricane season started on June 1st, we know that now that we're into the middle of the summer, we are in the middle of hurricane season, and it will continue actually till November 30th. Some folks don't realize just how late it goes. It's usually in August and September that we unfortunately bear the brunt of hurricanes in North Carolina. Most of us who live in the coastal areas of North Carolina right along Hurricane Alley are all too familiar with the devastation that such powerful storms cause. Can you share with our viewers some of the highlights of the initiatives FEMA is taking to help people get ready and be prepared? I know you have a program called Be a Force of Nature. And tell us about that so our viewers can better understand how to get ready for these storms.
Yes, sir. Force of Nature is a program we have undertaken with NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, jointly basically trying to get folks' attention. And there are three major components to it. We're asking folks to take a pledge to get ready themselves. That is, get a kit, get a plan, get an emergency kit, get a plan. Inform your neighbors, know what they're doing, and do that based on the threat you see to your community. In coastal North Carolina, that threat's pretty evident. I know folks down there recognize that threat, although sometimes we look at the last storm as the worst storm, and that may not be the case. Right. I know I was with Governor Barber during Katrina. Governor Barber used to say that Camille, which that was their paradigm, was maybe kill more people in Katrina because everybody thought that was as bad as it's going to get. So we really need to do some worst case planning and work with our neighbors and the community.
Well, having a plan of action is so important to be ready when the unexpected happens, or in these days, thankfully, with the successful tracking system that NOAA has that you mentioned, knowing how to get ready and not waiting till the last moment. What specific measures that are practical ways that our viewers can be ready and have an emergency plan so that they're not in a panic 2 or 3 days before a storm may hit? And should folks have different kinds of plans for different kinds of natural disaster? Is there a basic thing they should do for all disasters and then you build on that, or you build it in different directions depending on the kind of storm?
I think you build a basic family plan, and that starts with an emergency kit. I know, we ask people to be ready for, take care of themselves for up to 72 hours. I know that Doug Hoyle, the Director of Emergency Management in North Carolina, because he has so many isolated communities, he's asking folks, and I think it's a great idea, to be prepared for 72 hours to 7 days to be self-sufficient. And one of the reasons we do that is because able-bodied folks who are otherwise not, physically impacted by an emergency, like the hurricane, if we have to direct resources to help them because they haven't planned for themselves and their families, then we're diverting those limited resources from the folks who really need it, the disadvantaged, the elderly, and the frail. So build a kit and be ready for 72 hours minimum. We're asking, and again, Doug Hoyle's asking for 7 days for the people on the coast, and I think that's a great idea. And have an evacuation plan. Understand what that evacuation plan is and how you get away from, certainly the surge areas especially, and then have a communications plan. Let folks know, what you're doing, you're next to kin, because other people around the country who may be your friends and relatives, they'll worry about you. So you need to let people know how to get in touch with you, so have a communications plan so the family and friends can know what's going on. So those are the 3 components. The build a kit, have an evacuation plan, and then have a communications plan.
Very good points. Now tell me what to do, in North Carolina, when the eastern part of the state particularly, as we're talking about where the hurricane strikes generally happen. Livestock, animals, pets, we're a strong agricultural area, and whether it's livestock on the farm or whether it's a family's personal pet. Tell us what you recommend in dealing with that situation when families face disasters.
Well, I think first I'll speak to the pets, Congressman, because the pets are very important and they're part of the families. I happen to have been asked to go to Japan to speak twice since the earthquake and tsunami and the event, the nuclear reactor event. And it turns out that people had family plans to evacuate for the tsunami, but a lot of folks didn't take their pets. They went back in to get their pets when the second wave came, and that's when they lost a large percentage of folks. So pets are part of the family. They need to be planned for. And we ask the locals and the volunteer agencies and those folks that run the shelters to have facilities for those pets once people evacuate out and go to shelter locations. We've also asked, and I know many governors have asked, the hotel industry to be more accommodating of pets. Folks go to hotels farther inland. So pets are very important. And as far as livestock goes, and I remember well during Floyd in North Carolina, I didn't know there were so many hog farms in any state. I hadn't been in South Carolina for that one. But people really need to understand, the potential flooding to their livestock and get their livestock as they can into higher ground, because that was, as you recall, sir, the big problem there was the flooding of the farms, and so many livestock were lost.
Right, there were some pretty vivid pictures that made the AP on the livestock and just the situation that happened on the hog farms in particular, as you described. So I appreciate you sharing that. Tell us about what a family does to prepare for extended power outages. Are there specific things that they should do to get ready in case that happens?
Absolutely, and of course their emergency kit should include not only batteries but hand-cranked devices, and many of those are available. Certainly the communication, radios and flashlights have hand-cranked. They should also plan for oxygen, any medical supplies for an extended period of time. We know folks are going to get generators, and that's a good thing in many ways. But if they're going to have generators because of the loss of the grid, we urge them to take safe measures, because sadly enough, a whole lot of folks are lost during hurricane events when the power goes down and they improperly use generators and they're asphyxiated because they put them in closed areas inside the house. They're not used to using them. So if you're going to use a generator, please take safe measures to do so.
Very, very good point. Something that is not generally thought about until the last moment. We hear, well, let me ask you this. What about ATMs? What should people do in terms of cash? Because that seems to be a panic. We so rely on being able to run, go get some money, and then they don't think, well, wait a minute, the power's out, it's not going to work. So.
No, banking and finance are a very important part of disaster, and we see that every time. We have talked to the banking industry, and actually as we're reviewing right now the national response framework that kind of guides our actions, and Administrator Fugate would like to think banking and finance are a more important part of the response framework because folks do need money. We urge people to, and we got some lead time because NOAA's doing a better job every year. We urge them to go get cash. ATMs will be out, but we also work to the banking industry, and there are portable, and this is done oftentimes through state and local emergency management offices with the local banks. There are portable ATM machines that can be brought into the area, but as you evacuate out of the area, when we urge people, certainly in the surge zones, to get out of the area, please go to the banks early and get some cash.
Very good point, and often, again, one of the last things people think about, but then they're going to need that cash if they have to go buy emergency supplies. Now, we hear a lot of times when we hear these advance warnings, the terms are very similar, and sometimes I hear people discussing it and saying, no, that's not what that means. Yes, it is. Well, how concerned or how panicked or how quick is this? The difference between a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning. If you'll just explain those simple terms about how they can make a profound difference in planning.
There are two differences, and they have to do with time and intensity. So tropical storm watches are really 48 hours out, and the wind's 36 to 73 hours. Then you go tropical storm warnings. Again, it moves that time frame in 36 hours. Moves up. When you go into hurricane watches, then you're talking about 48 hours out, winds to 76 miles an hour or greater, and then hurricane warnings 36 hours. So, but I wouldn't. People shouldn't. It's not an exact science. I mean, as good as NOAA is, as good as our scientists and atmospheric folks are, it is not an exact science. So, first of all, don't follow that little line, that little track, and believe that you're safe. Look at the whole range, the probable error thing, and the difference between 73 miles an hour and 75 miles an hour, is not that great. So don't rely too heavily on these things. Do what your local emergency managers tell you to do. Do what the local district NOAA offices recommend you to do, and listen to your state emergency managers.
Probably the simple definition that I usually have shared with folks is that hurricane watch means be on the lookout and get ready,
yes,
and then the warning means it's coming. So
that's a good way to look at it.
No more hesitations. It's coming.
Yes, sir.
Our congressional district includes several coastal counties: Brunswick, New Hanover, and Pender. They were hit hard in the late 1990s, as you and I both well remember, because I know you were down in North Carolina after Hurricane Fran. And Bertha, Fran, Irene, Bonnie, Dennis, Floyd, these are all names that are all too familiar to people in our area. And even though the beach communities have the brunt of these direct storms, we know flooding was prevalent through the entire region. It was absolutely horrible. It was a 100-year flood situation with Floyd. But one thing that I've been a strong advocate for is making sure that we have long-term authorization of the National Flood Insurance Program, not just a short-term fix, so that homeowners can have the assurance they need and protections they need when faced with flooding. What do you think people should know about flood insurance and why it's so important that folks get flood insurance?
Well, first of all, sir, we appreciate your support of the program. It's incredibly important that people have flood insurance, and oftentimes it's not well understood. They should look at their policies, their homeowner policies, but the fact is their homeowner policies will cover wind. Only the National Flood Insurance Program covers floods, and even just a couple of inches in a home can cause, grave damage to that structure. So, and even though people say, "Well, I'm not, and I'm not in a low-lying area, I'm not in a flood," if the least likely area you're in, you still may get, we talk about 100-year floods and 50-year floods, but the rates go down. So it's really an incentive for everyone to get flood insurance. I know that some folks only have it because it's the conditions of their loan, and their loan, they pay off their loan, they let the flood insurance go. That's not a wise thing. The only real protection against flood is to have be a member of the National Flood Insurance Program.
Well, thank you for emphasizing that, and we want to continue to make sure we do have flood insurance and a long-term authorization for it. Earlier you mentioned about your local emergency coordinators or emergency management. I know North Carolina has a very strong emergency management team, and I'm always honored to work with them because I'm impressed with the work they do, as well as, of course, our county emergency managers in our district. But viewers may not realize that FEMA only acts when called upon. And earlier in the show I mentioned that as soon as the storm hits, people want to know, where's FEMA? Where's the help we're going to get? And don't realize that there is a technical process that has to be followed, that has to be complied with legally. And that is that FEMA can only act when the state requests it. Will you explain to us how that process works? So when things happen, people will realize this is what's got to be done so we can get the help we need.
Yes, sir, and I'm glad you asked that because it is not well understood. And I've got to mention, and he did, sir, but the state of North Carolina has got a very robust emergency management program. Director Doug Hoyle is a personal friend of mine. As a matter of fact, when Irene came up the coast last year, Administrator Fugate and I were concerned about, and we had 13 jurisdictions, including Puerto Rico, impacted all the way up to North Carolina. We were concerned about North Carolina, but we said, North Carolina's got a very strong program, and they won't go to the federal government unless they actually need it. And of course, the president did declare the coastal counties and others for that. Yeah. But that gets to the process that you ask about, Congressman. Of course, the locals are in charge. And every day around America, our great first responders through the fire, police, and emergency medical, they're responding to disasters. They may be smaller disasters, but certainly they're disasters within that community. Every now and then something comes along that's too great for the local first responders, and the counties or the jurisdictions go to the states. And the states provide that help through mutual aid or through state resources. Oftentimes the governors will call out their National Guard. Right. But there are events, like oftentimes hurricanes, in which the governors need the help of the federal government. And so they go to the president through our regional offices, again, our regional office for North Carolina and Atlanta, and they go through us to request from the president a disaster declaration. The president can then declare a disaster, and then the full, based on what he includes in that declaration, FEMA's there to support. That sounds very bureaucratic, but that can go in a matter of hours in a large event, and I've seen it go in a matter of hours. But also, I don't want to make it appear that we don't work hand in glove with the states every single day. doing planning, doing exercises. So we're there working with the states and localities, well before events happen.
And speaking of that, tell us, occasionally you'll hear the President make a statement or declaration right before a storm hits to pre-position resources. That's become more prevalent since Katrina, because there was a lot of debate about the lag time that passed in responding to Katrina. So it seems like that a silver lining to that is that in storms since then, there's been some quick pre-positioning so that as the hurricane warning is issued and it does strike, that they're ready to go in a much quicker fashion. Is that not true in terms of
Absolutely, Congressman. And Congress, of course, after Katrina, as you well know, passed the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act. And that gave us, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the authority to pre-position things based on an anticipated event. So well before a storm, actually we go into hurricane watch or warning, we have pre-positioned resources around the area we believe will be impacted based on NOAA's forecast into what we call instant support bases. And we sent teams out. We'll send teams from Atlanta, for example, to Raleigh, and oftentimes the decision will be made through the state emergency manager and our leadership in Raleigh, in this case, to send folks down to the counties to be located there before an event actually happens, and we do that routinely now. So we have the authority even pre-declaration, and of course the President has the he has the authority to declare before the event happens, and we do that in for some limited categories of assistance.
Well, tell me now, after the storm, what happens in terms of the types of federal assistance people can get? Because sometimes I know there's certain community assistance that's available, and then there's certain individual assistance available. And sometimes there's confusion about that when they say, oh, well, we heard we got a disaster declaration, and folks may think that automatically means something, and it may not, because there's different categories of assistance. Can you explain that in simple terms for us?
Yes, sir. The thing we focus on initially is the individual assistance program. When the President includes that in the declaration, because there's survivors and their families out there needing assistance, folks can call in through our 1-800 number, which is on ready.gov, and ask for assistance. We will then, we have several different programs. If the home is damaged, folks will come out, do an inspection of the program, of the home under that program, and we'll reimburse uninsured losses. We also pay for damages from medical damages, dental, and others under the individual assistance program. That's not automatic. That's included in the President's declaration based on the need. Then the public assistance program, which helps communities restore and replace infrastructure, schools, hospitals that are publicly owned. So publicly owned structures, that program is oftentimes declared, not always. As you said, there's some confusion sometimes by folks. So that's a little longer term program. We also pay for debris removal. Right. Under Category A, that becomes a very big thing. Yeah. There's debris clearance to get it out of their way for emergency vehicles. That's one category, and then removal and disposition, that's another category, and then emergency work. So that the governor calls out the guard, that's expensive, and we can pay for the incremental cost of the governor calling out the guard or the highway patrol and what they do at the state level, as well as at the within the declared county areas.
Tell me one other quick area, because our time is just about to run out. We unfortunately also have been victims of tornadoes in our area, and they strike quite quickly. Any other variants in your advice about how folks get ready when they hear there's a chance of a tornado strike?
We have been encouraging communities to adopt safe rooms and homes to be built with safe rooms in them. That's really the best measure that can be taken. Schools, certainly, hospitals, safe rooms, because as you indicated, Congressman, the time is, although the science is getting better, we get a little more warning. Folks need to have safe rooms and need to have a plan on getting themselves and their loved ones into those safe rooms. And we've had terrible outbreaks in this last 2 years.
And for people and for new homes, I understand about having a safe room. For people in homes they already have, go to the center of the house,
Yes,
go into
sir.
a bathroom, or some other suggestion?
No,
before they
that's exactly right. Go to the center of the house, and within bathrooms, I know several folks have been saved by getting in bathtubs themselves with their children. But that's a good way to do it. And we've seen retrofitting existing homes with safe rooms in several Midwestern states now.
Well, thank you. This has all been very, very helpful. And tell us again the website that folks can go to learn more or to find out more about what you've discussed today.
Yes, sir. We encourage people to go to ready.gov, and then specifically on hurricanes, ready.gov/hurricane. And then I would encourage your constituents to go to readync.org, readync.org. That's North Carolina's Emergency Management Agency, and that's specific for your state, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for your service in your current role with FEMA. And for those who may have joined us later in the program today, thank you for your service to our nation in the United States Army and the time you spent at Fort Bragg in the military, as well as the time you spent in wonderful places like Wilmington after we've had the unfortunate incident of a hurricane striking. I appreciate Mr. Carwile being my guest today for this edition of Capital Conversations, and look forward to our continued partnership and working together to help protect our citizens in the event that natural disaster strikes. For those of you who do want to know more locally, we have 4 congressional offices in southeastern North Carolina, so please feel free to contact me or my staff if we can be of assistance in Fayetteville, Wilmington, Bolivia, or Lumberton at any of our local offices, or you can simply go to our website. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter. If you are likely to have questions about this program or other issues with the federal government, always feel free to contact one of our congressional offices, and we'll be happy to assist. I hope you'll join us again for another edition of Capital Conversations. This is our opportunity to share what's going on in Washington as it affects us back home in North Carolina. God bless you all and your families. Thank you for watching.